A nice feature of IndianaMap is the layer gallery. You can see the categories here, and they're the same up here. So I'm going to click on the first one, Environment, and you can click on any of these subcategories, but I found it's easier to just click Explore All, and then we get all of them with fewer clicks. So for any of them, I want to give an example of the confined feeding operation. You can click on the preview and find out quite a bit about this. There's a description. This gives all the confined feeding operations, which are the regulated livestock facilities in Indiana. And you can get a preview of what they are. Clicking on the legend easily shows the categories. So the main ones are the smaller confined feeding operations and the larger confined animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. In the metadata, we can also find out more about what are the questions we can ask of this. We can either click on the metadata, and this is probably not very meaningful to you unless you already know GIS. It's a standard format for all the information about it. But a slightly easier way is just to click on any of the dots, and now we'll see in a table the information that's available. So for each of them, we see whether it's a CAFO or a CFO, and we see the number of animals. So this one has 4,920 sows. So that means that same information would be available for all the others. And now we'll browse through some others. One thing I want to mention is that some of the layers are very old. For example, this one, Agricultural Census 1997, that is out of date. There's been 3 additional ag census since then. So it just means the Indiana Geological and Water Survey has not chosen to keep that layer up, but they didn't delete the one that was there. So don't assume that just because they're here, they're terribly recent. The same is for the crops. They used to download them every year, but the last time they did that is 2016. So there are other places to find the cropland layer that are more recent. The land cover also is not the most recent, so there are national databases that you can get it from, but it's certainly good enough. Another one I think is interesting is this managed lands. This is a brand new layer, 2020, and it's quite interesting. It's all the land that's managed by federal agencies or cities or counties. So for each of these, it shows the park and something about that place. So I think there's a lot of information that could be helpful if you're looking for parks or managed land. You can see some of the monitoring data. This bacterial layer, don't do anything with it because it's from 1994. That's way too old. It's especially good to look at the ones that are fairly new. So I thought, for example, the brownfields layer is quite interesting. This shows sites where there was an environmental problem, so there's a piece of real estate that's not well used because of that. If we click on legend, we see that there's active and inactive sites, and if we click on one of them, we can see what further information we get. So there's something about how it's being followed up as well as who owns it. The Superfund sites layer is also quite new, and so it's good to see where the Superfund sites are if you know something about them. There's just one kind of site here, but there's Continental Steel, for example. So it's a very easy way to find out where are the Superfund sites in Indiana. The soil survey data is here, and there's nothing wrong with it except that it's a lot harder to see than other ways. So if I zoom in, if you click on any polygon, all the soil information is there that you can get through the web soil survey. But as you can see, it's a little harder to access this way. And there's no color coding, there's just the outlines, which makes it harder to get information. Wind energy isn't really part of watershed leadership, but it might be interesting to see where the wind power density is highest. And if any of you know this area, this is the area with a lot of wind turbines in the state, so it makes sense. The hydrology category has many layers of interest in watershed management. One I'll click on is aquifer sensitivity. This shows how sensitive the aquifer is to contamination. So the red shows the very high potential for contamination, and green and blue are lower areas. So this isn't too surprising that the higher areas are in the north and then along the major river valleys where there's a lot of sand and gravel. The floodplain layer shows very important information that anyone involved in watersheds should know about. It shows the floodplains as a whole, and then we'll zoom in and look at the legend and show how it shows the floodway. The 1% annual chance, formerly known as the 100-year floodplain, and then the 500-year floodplain, which is or is not protected by a levee. So this same information would be available in the floodplain tool by the IDNR, but this is particularly useful for bringing it up in conjunction with other layers, and it could be very useful in your watershed. The hydrology monitoring category does not show water quality monitoring. It's got the soil moisture, the volunteer precipitation, or COCO-RAS. It's got the stream flow gauges, but for some reason there's no preview. I don't know why some of these layers don't have a preview. This is automated weather stations, and this is the main weather station data, but for some reason is out of date. But the automated can be kind of interesting. It shows the different levels. These would be like airports and Purdue research farms where there is data collected on a continual basis rather than by a volunteer who reads a gauge. Now we come to the hydrology water bodies category. Unfortunately, this is a little complicated. These drainage flow lines, also known as local resolution National Hydrography Database, are actually have more lines that are actually present on the landscape. So that one is problematic, and I don't recommend using it. The lakes and ponds at this scale should be fine. I think the best one to get the normal streams layer is this streams, ditches, etc. Kind of a funny name. But if you zoom in and look, this is the level that there actually are streams. So this is the one I recommend using for a streams layer. This lake bathymetry data is very nice, I think, and it provides data that hasn't always been very easy to find. So if we go into one of the lakes, we probably want to go up in the north. This looks like a lake that would have some interesting information. Well, actually, it's quite a shallow lake, but anyway, some of the deeper lakes really have beautiful data, but you can see how deep it is, and it's like a topographic map inside the lake. It's just a beautiful layer. The hydrology water quality category is where the water quality information really is. And the two that are important are from 2018. That would be the most recent lists of impaired lakes and streams. Let's start with the streams. So everything that's in orange is a stream that is impaired. Let's zoom in a little bit. And then if we click on one of them, we'll see that it gives the information on the name. The actual impairment is difficult to find. So there's a different tool called the E303D list at IDEM, and if we actually want to know what it is, that tool will be a little easier to figure out. The third 2018 layer is the TMDLs, and this is quite similar to the 303D list. It just shows where there has actually been a TMDL or a water quality plan already developed. Then the same information is available for 2016. These other layers are out of date, so probably not very useful. The hydrology water wells database layer is really quite fantastic. If I open it up, you can see how many wells there are. It's 414,000. This is an immense amount of work that IDNR did in recent decades to put those all on the map. So if I zoom in to a small location, the only difference in the color is whether it was actually field located or estimated. And for each well, it gives quite a large information. For example, there's the depth. and it gives the owner at the time. So these are for well records, because when a well is dug, all that information is required to be provided to IDNR. Now in this format, it's not very usable. There are other tools, but this would probably be for GIS users. You could download it and actually get a lot of information out of having those wells. The watersheds category has the HUC 8, 10, and 12 watersheds, and they're as outlines. So for the 8, for example, which is the largest, we just have the outlines of them. If you click on any of them, you get information. The wetlands category has several choices. This Wetlands of Indiana would be something called the National Wetland Inventory, and this is non-regulatory. They always emphasize that, but it was done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to give people an idea where the wetlands are, but you can't use this for official wetland delineation. It only shows, the legend only shows that they're there or not there. If you click on any of them, you'll see it gives whether it's forested shrub or different types of wetlands. So it can be very important in getting to know your watershed. Just remember that this is not wetlands for the purpose of regulation. I want to finish with a couple layers in the reference section. The LiDAR color hillshade uses the amazingly detailed LiDAR elevation data, which is useful to view topography and can be put behind other layers for really nice visualization. The land parcel layers are very interesting. The 2019 has a preview. At the state level, it's not very clear, but if I zoom in, you can see this amazing layer. This is information from our counties that was shared with the state. The legend shows how a land use is assigned to each parcel. Of course, the parcels are much smaller in residential areas, the green, than in agricultural, the light tan areas. The orange are commercial land use. So it's an amazing layer, and I'm sure you can think of ways that it can be useful in watershed management. So in conclusion, IndianaMap provides a wealth of layers, both to display on IndianaMap or to download and use for other purposes, and I encourage you to try it out.